The box module is like its own little microcosm inside of Beaver Builder. There are so many things you can do with it. And once you get familiar with how it works, it is going to rock your world. The box module is all about making it easy to create designs with two very powerful layout models, Flexbox and CSS Grid. In this course, we're going to explore some of the box module's most common uses, like intelligent alignment and space distribution, creating fine details. We'll create this fun, colorful grid, and we'll take a look-see under the hood at one of Beaver Builder's premium templates that was created with lots and lots of box modules. This course is mostly comprised of a series of demos where we will create and stylize actual design layouts. And that way you can get started right away with some first-hand experience about some possibilities that the box module opens up to you. Because the real fun starts when your own creativity kicks in and you start getting all these great ideas about what you're going to do with the box module on your own projects. I'm going to start off by just giving you a quick overview on the box module settings. And I'm going to keep this part as succinct as possible because I put together a handful of demos on actual design layouts. And I really think you're going to get the most from this course by just seeing things in action. I've also created Assistant Pro libraries with all of the demo content. One of the other things I've provided for you is a PDF handout that goes over the box module's core concepts. And you'll also find details on all the settings and the technical aspects of the box module in Beaver Builder's support documentation. Another thing you'll find helpful if you don't already know the fundamentals of CSS Grid and Flexbox, I will give you a link to CSS Tricks documentation on those subjects. Because that's what we're doing here. We're using the box module interface to create layouts using CSS Grid and Flexbox layout models. And that's reflected here in the display settings. You see that we have 3 choices for display settings: Flex, Grid, and Layers. And you'll see that some of the options on the interface change depending on the type of display I have selected. The main settings up here at the top of the Children tab will also change depending on the type of display that we have selected. But for the most part, the other settings just stay the same no matter what display type you have selected. One exception is that the Layers display has no gap setting. So that's the broad strokes regarding box module settings. Now let's talk about a few other key points. In the box module, it's really common to nest boxes within other boxes. And quite often, really, we have boxes within boxes within boxes. And this forms a parent-child relationship, the parent being the outer container and the children being the nested items. So the Children tab is really handy because it lets you control settings of all of the nested items within this parent container. So with all this nesting going on, it can be kind of confusing to navigate your way around these complex layouts. And that's where the outline panel comes in handy. You can also find your way around using the tool tab, but really when I'm using the box modules, I definitely prefer the outline panel. The next suggestion I have is that you use the Flex and Grid Inspector tools in Chrome and Firefox. I especially find this true with grid layouts because you can get a visual on your grid lines this way, and it really just helps out a lot to see what's going on behind the scenes. Now let's go back to the Beaver Builder modules, and you'll see that for box, we have the basic box, but we also have these other presets. And these are just some simple templates to get started with. Now let's take a look at some of these layouts that I'm going to demo for you in this course. There's a handful of nav bars and some boxy layouts that feature the capabilities of CSS Grid. Then I'm going to touch on some of the technical aspects of the Good Vibes Beaver Builder template set, which, as you'll see, makes really great use of the box module. All right, that's the end of this overview video. Let's take a look at some of these demo layouts. All of the demo content for this course is available on Assistant Pro. And to access that, go to assistant.pro and get a free account if you don't already have one. Follow the link from the demo you're watching, and that will take you to the Assistant Pro library that goes with that demo. Then once you get the library, you can use the Assistant Pro plugin to add the content to any of your WordPress sites. You'll find the download link at assistant.pro from these 3 little dots up on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Alternately, you can search the WordPress plugin repo for Assistant Pro. Once you have Assistant Pro installed on your WordPress site, you can toggle the Assistant sidebar open and closed with this little pencil icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Select Community Libraries and you will find the demo content that you have added to your account. Select the template provided. Then from there, you can use the import action to either replace your current page or create a new page. Now that's how to access the demo content. This nav layout uses a combination of Flex and Grid, and I think it's a good example of how Grid can be used to add small details to your site. So let's open up the outline panel and take a look at what's going on. The first item inside of our row is a Flex container that contains all of the items in our header. The Olympic rings are sitting inside of a container that has Flex Grow set to 1, telling the container to take up all the available space. Because all the other children of the parent container have Flex Grow set to the default 0. So all the menu items are inside of their own Flex containers, and inside of those is a photo module and a grid box with 2 text modules on the grid. All right, now I'm going to start up a blank page and get started recreating this design. So we'll start with our outermost Flex container, that's our parent, and then there's 2 children Flex containers inside of that. The one on the left contains our Olympic rings, and the one on the right contains our 5 menu items. The child container on the left with the Olympic rings in it has Flex Grow set to 1. Within the child container on the right, there are 5 more Flex containers. And I'm just going to use the duplicate function in the outline panel. Next comes a photo module, which is our Olympic rings. So the box that sits in, we're going to select horizontal align left and vertical align center. I think now I'll just pop in all those little flag photos. Now I'm just going to go back into my parent container and align vertical center and horizontal left. So now I just have to duplicate this photo module a bunch of times and make sure that all of the other Flex containers are aligned how I want them. I can just fast forward through this part. Now it's time to add in the text, and that's going to sit inside of a grid box. So putting the text inside of a grid is going to let me just really easily get these pieces of text right up against each other. So I just need one column. And for the rows, the top one is going to be 11 pixels added using the freeform text selection. The second one's a fluid row. And I'm also going to zero out the gap spacing. Now we can put our text modules in the grid. Let's go back to that year text module because that needs to be aligned right. I'm also going to add this little piece of CSS to our text modules because by default, there's a little bit of margin on our text that in a normal setting would make it look good, but it doesn't work for us right here. And that super thin font variant doesn't look quite right to me on the year, so I'm going to make that a little bit thicker. Now at this point, we just need to duplicate this grid a bunch of times and stick them where they need to go, replace the text. I can just fast forward through this part. Now it's just down to making a few final adjustments. The original layout that I built that I'm referencing was full width layout on the row. Let's just take a second to reference the original demo that I made and how this compares. In this original, it has better spacing between the menu items. I think it's okay that the flags are a little bit bigger, but it does need a little bit more breathing room between the menu items. And this one doesn't look quite so cluttered as the new one with the larger flags. So this flex container is the container on the right that holds all the 5 flex containers that hold our menu items. So this is a parent container, and those 5 containers inside are the children. So from the parent container, we can utilize the children tab to add spacing to all of the children at once, which is one of the super awesome things about the box module. The last thing we're going to do is tidy this up for small screens. So the layout needs help on both small and medium screens. So let's start up here and get our Olympic rings to show up on those screen sizes. So first we're going to go to the outermost parent container and we're going to change the direction from row to column. Next we're going to go to the box that the rings sit inside of and center. All right, moving on to the parent container that our 5 menu items sit in. We're also going to change that to column, align everything left, and now we need to go in and go to these text modules that have the years in them, and we're going to align the text left. I think I'm going to give this container here a little bit of padding on the left. And I think I'll stop here. Thanks so much for watching this demo on how to add some fine details to your sites using the box module with Flexbox and CSS Grid.
Oh
today we're working out how to build this nav bar using Beaver Builder's Box Module. And I'll share a link to this demo content with you as well. So let's just take a quick peek at the nav row, which is a box module set to grid display. Then within that container set to grid, I have 5 more box modules nested in that set to Flexbox column orientation. Then inside each of these 5 Flexbox children containers, there's a photo module and a text editor module. So we're just going to rebuild this real quick so you can see how it's put together. First, we're going to start with our grid container. And that means we want the display setting to be grid. Our grid is going to have 5 columns and just 1 row. And I think that's all for our grid parent container. So now we're going to add the first of our 5 Flexbox children containers. For this layout, we're going to want the column direction, which means that our items are going to flow from top to bottom. The default row direction has items flow from left to right. Now we're just going to set the vertical alignment to end and the horizontal alignment to center. Now we can drop in our first photo module. Select our photo and size it. Now I'm going to drop in our text module, add our text and stylize it. And then once that's done, it's just a matter of duplicating this module and replacing the content within it. And I'm going to do that here in the outline panel. You just right click and select duplicate. I can fast forward through this portion so you don't have to watch my busy work. So that's it. Now we can jump back to our original piece of demo content just to compare. And I think that is just what we built. One more thing I want to point out to you is that when you're ready to link, something that's cool about the box module is that you can link the whole module. So now that whole div is a link. Before I wrap this up, I just want to show you real quick some of the responsive design possibilities here. So let's just jump into the responsive design editor. You can see that this isn't looking so hot on mobile devices. And what's cool is you can easily change your grid orientation and how many cells you have in both the columns and rows, depending on what device you're using with the responsive editor. So now on every screen size, it has the original 5 columns, 1 row, but now on mobile devices, it has 5 rows and 1 column. And likewise, you can tweak all of these Flexbox settings depending on your screen size using the responsive editor. Well, I think this is a good stopping point. Have fun creating with the box module, and thanks for watching. Bye! We're going to build this nav that has images positioned to the left of the text. And this is totally built with Flexbox modules. So our boxes are all set to the Flex display property. And I'll just do a quick rundown in the outline panel. The outermost container is a parent container that contains both the music notes on the left as well as the nav items. The music notes child container has FlexGrow property 1. Now, because the child container that contains our nav item has the FlexGrow property to the default 0, that means that the music note container is told to take up all the space that it possibly can. And if we click over here on this child container that contains all our nav items, we see that there's no entry here for FlexGrow. So that means that they're only going to take up as much space as they need to. They're not going to grow at all. And then this container over here also has children. And each of these children contains a photo module and a text module. We have the align set to center for both horizontal and vertical. And gap is set to 6. And I think all the other settings are just the default settings. Now let's go ahead and build this nav from scratch. Okay, so we start with the outermost Flexbox container, and then this box has two children. One of them contains the music notes on the left, and the other one contains all the nav items on the right. So the container that has the music notes is going to be set to Flex Grow 1. That's done here under sizing and placement. And that's going to tell that container on the left to take up all the available space. Our right side container that's going to have our nav items over there is set to the default 0, which means only take up the space that you need to for the content that I put inside of you, and no more than that. All right, let's get our little music note logo in here. And let's get this down to an appropriate size. That looks good. All right, let's get started putting together our nav. So I'm just going to put one nav container in here. Then I'm going to put the content inside of it. I'm going to align center both horizontal and vertical and take down the gap a little bit. I remember that was at 6 on our reference layout. And thanks to the box module, this is a super easy layout to put together. We're just going to drop in a photo module. I'm going to make this a little smaller here. The next step is our text module. We can add in our text, and I'm going to stylize our text. There's a little default margin here around the paragraph text, so here's a CSS snippet that takes that off. It can center up the way it should. Now we can just duplicate this a bunch of times and replace the photos and text. And that's not going to be something very interesting to you, so I'm going to fast forward through this portion. Okay, let's take a look at our reference demo and see how this compares. I'm not trying to get this to look exactly the same, but some of the key points that I missed, I need to change the background color, and I need to make the layout full width on this row. Now we're just gonna finish this up real quick. So I have the body placeholder content here saved on my site as a saved row. Let's take a look at how this looks in the responsive editor. Make a few little adjustments to this so that it looks better on small screen sizes. So I think I'm going to take this outside parent container and I'm going to make it column direction on medium screen sizes, and that's going to consequently also change it on small. And I think I'll also align this logo, the music notes logo, center. So these nav items seem to look okay on medium. Let's see how they look on small. And they fall off the screen, so we're just gonna change this to column direction as well. And then I'm going to align them all left. So that's one of the cool things about the box module is the types of things that you can do with responsive designs. Well, I think this is a good stopping point. I'm going to wrap up this demo now. Thanks so much for joining me. In this box module demo, we're going to use the layers display to create this tricolor badge with slanted text inside. You can see here in the outline panel, we have a layer display parent container with 3 flex children containers. The innermost flex container has a text module in it. The outermost flex containers are just empty. They're only there to provide some color for our badge, and I've given them all a border radius to make them circles. And the split header layout the badge is sitting inside of is a box module preset. Now I'm going to go ahead and recreate this for you so you can see how it's put together. Let's start by adding our split header preset. Then I'm going to put the layers container for our badge on its own row. We're going to build it out and then we'll drop it into the split header layout when we're done with it. Here we go with our parent container. I'm going to change that to the layers display and center both horizontally and vertically. The first flex container that we're going to put down is going to function as our outermost ring. And this is just going to be an empty Flexbox container with a background color. And I think for now, I'm just going to keep these square, and then I'll do a second pass and add the border radius to all of our containers. All right, let's do our second layer. This one's just going to be a little bit smaller than the first layer, and I'm going to make it yellow. Then we'll do the same thing with the next one. It's going to be a little bit smaller. And this one's going to be blue. Now we can drop in our text module and stylize our text. Now we have this little CSS snippet that's going to slant our text a little bit. And we can head into that blue flex container and center up our text. All right, now that this is all put together, I'm just going to take a quick pass on all 3 of our flex containers to add the border radius, turning them into circles. So the radius just needs to be half the size of the container, and that's going to make it into a circle. And now we're ready to stick our badge inside of our split header. And we can add a little bit of style to the split header menu real quick. Okay, let's fill out the rest of the page. There's a black bar across the top and a blue background on the body with some placeholder content. I have both of those things here as saved rows. All right, this is coming together well. The groovy text here is not quite centered, so I'm just gonna give it a little bit of margin so that it looks right. So that's one idea of something you can do with the layers display in the box module. It's a super fun feature to play around with. I hope you enjoyed creating this split header layout with a layers badge inside of it with me. These 4 cards are built using the layers display option, and they're sitting inside of a 2-row by 2-column grid container. But I think the key point that you're going to find helpful in this demo is how to use empty Flexbox containers to space out your content. The outline panel makes things really easy to visualize. There's our grid parent container with our 4 cards sitting inside. And let's take a look at one of those empty Flex containers with the Flex Grow setting. This one has a value of 1, and you can see if I increase the value, then the spacing also increases. Now, how Flex Grow works is that if you have the value set to 0, which is the default, the container will only be large enough to fit the objects that are within it. And if you have the value set to 1 or above, that container will grow proportionally in relationship to the other children that are sharing that same parent container. And the resource that I think sums that up the best is from CSS Tricks, so you can check that out for a more in-depth explanation. All right, let's build this out starting with a blank page. So first we're going to lay down our grid container, which has 2 rows and 2 columns. Now we're going to put our first card into the grid. And we'll set the display to layers. The first layer is going to be a photo module. And next I'll put a flex container on top of that photo. I'm going to give it some transparent black color. And that's going to let the text show up better on top of the photo. Now I'm going to round the corners on both the photo layer and the transparent black box. Now we're ready to put the content into our card, and this transparent black box is going to be the container for our content. And we're going to want to set the direction to column, and that's going to have our content flow from the top to the bottom. We're also going to set horizontal and vertical align both to center. The next step is to add and stylize our icon and heading modules. Now that our content has been added, we can add in our Flex Grow spacers. And for this example, I've added 3. We're going to have to adjust our photo layer here. We want the fill container setting to cover. Now I'm going to publish this just to show you that adding those containers actually didn't do anything because the Flex Grow value by default is 0. Now let's check out what happens if I bump up the Flex Grow value on this first spacer to 1. Now the first spacer is taking up all the available space. Now let's do the bottom container as well, and you'll see that both the top and the bottom container will share the available space. Now I'm going to add in the flex grow value 1 to the center container as well, and you'll see that all 3 spacers are going to share the available space. But in this example, I actually have the center spacer set to flex grow 3, and the top and the bottom are flex grow 1. And that gives us more space between our content. Now I'm just going to duplicate this card 3 times, and I can replace all the photos and icons and text. So I'm just going to fast forward through this part. And I do want my card spaced out more, so I can do that from the grid containers gap setting. Next, I'm just going to pop in the heading, and since that's not really part of this demo, I'm going to add it as a saved row. The last thing I'm going to do is make an adjustment so that this looks good on small screen sizes. So if we enter the responsive editor and take a look at the small screen size, it isn't looking so great. So all we have to do to fix this is in the grid container, toggle to the small screen size, and set the grid to have 1 column and 4 rows. So all of our cards are just gonna stack up on top of each other. So that's a rundown on how to make these cards. The layout that we're making in this demo uses a grid parent container with Flexbox children containers. Some of the Flexbox children containers have photo modules. Some of them are just empty Flexbox containers that have color backgrounds. And if I right click and select inspect, that's going to open up Chrome's developer tools. I'm using Chrome, but Firefox will work similarly. And you can see that my grid container here has this little badge next to it marked grid. And if I click on the badge, then that's going to open up the Chrome Grid Inspector, which gives me a visual on my grid lines and some information about my grid. Most of the items on my grid just take up 1 grid space, 1 row space, 1 column space, except for this picture over here, the woman with the flowers in her hair with the gray background and the man with the orange background. Those 2 items take up 2 rows. And that black border that you see around the outside, that's just the row background behind the grid. That's not actually part of the grid. Let's take a look at how this looks in Beaver Builder's outline panel real quick before we start. This here is our grid parent container. And by default, items are going to be placed on your grid from left to right and then from top to bottom. And as I hover over the items with my mouse, you can see them become highlighted in the outline panel. See the flow. Already has something, so then it jumps over here. Now let's open up a blank page and we're gonna build this out from scratch. All right, the first thing we need is our grid container. We're gonna set the display to grid. We're gonna give it 4 tracks and 2 rows. I also need to remove the gap spacing this layout doesn't have any gap between the grid spaces. Okay, now I'm going to stick some Flexbox children containers in here. I can just go into the outline panel and duplicate this first one. The first item on our grid spans down 2 rows. That's the picture of the woman with the flowers in her hair and the gray background. And the default will indicate that everything takes up 1 column in 1 row, so we can leave the column as is. So our first 3 grid spaces all have photos inside of them. Now we need to go back and make a little adjustment on this first image. You see it's not taking up the space that it's supposed to, and that's because we need to set the photo module to cover. And just like the first image, the woman with the flowers in her hair, this guy with the orange background needs to span down 2 rows, and we need to set the photo module to cover. We actually need 5 columns I'm seeing here in our grid, not 4. So that's easy enough to just go back into our grid parent container and bump up the number of columns to 5. So this next box doesn't have a photo module in it. We're just going to go into that Flex child container and set the background color. And that's one of our default colors here in the color picker. So now we've used up our full first row as well as the first space in our second row. That means that our next item is going to be pushed down to our second row and second column. We've run out of Flexbox containers, so I'm going to duplicate this one just to fill in the rest of the spaces. And this next box is just a color block. And all of our colors are part of the preloaded presets down here in Beaver Builder. The next box gets a photo module. And now for our last box, which is a color. And now we can wrap things up by adding our black border, which is just a background color for our row that surrounds our parent grid. Maybe just add a little margin up here to the top. And we're done. Thanks so much for watching. I wanted to take a minute to show you a few selections from this template set that's called Good Vibes, and it's available for Beaver Builder on Assistant Pro. Because it really makes good use of the box module. And I'm not going to rebuild anything, I just want to take a look around. And this is what it looks like on Assistant Pro. It's free. It's a full starter website with 24 pages. And I've just picked out a few rows to share with you, but you can find a ton more content in here that was created with the box module. You can really learn a lot from reverse engineering templates. This first row is a grid with 2 Flexbox containers in it. Here's a grid parent container. The first Flex container has a background color on it. Then it has a photo that sits inside of it. And the photo module has this little CSS snippet that makes it tilt. Then here's the Flexbox container on the right, set to vertical align center. It's a great feature of the box module to be able to easily align all of your content vertical center. The next row also has a ton of box modules inside it, as you can see. In particular, I really like how the box module is used to position these icons on the upper right-hand side of the photo modules. And this is done using the box module's layered display. So there's a lot to learn here about the box module. These great testimonial boxes, which are made up of a flex column parent container. You can see here, these are the two children. Within the child container, there's another flex column that holds this quote graphic with a text module below it. And a bunch of stuff nested. You can just see this template is like box module within box module within box module. And once you get using the box module, that's really where it's at. It's so much fun. You are going to want to put everything inside of a box module. So I think I'm going to wrap things up here. Check out the Good Vibes template set on Assistant Pro. It's awesome. It features a lot of box modules. It features global styles, all kinds of really great stuff that came out with Beaver Builder 2.8. Thanks for watching. Bye.